So we're coming up towards the end of the hour, and I want to make sure they have some takeaway. I've been giving you a lot of information about how to think about things, how those of us in the IT/OT space are moving, why ZÆTHER is spinning off, like why we're approaching these things differently. We recognize that these are so new. These are within the past 5 years. We've been capable of even doing this, and now it's become the expectation. So we have to drive things forward. I love these Gartner hype cycles. If anybody ever has looked at them, they're very exciting. They're called hype cycles. I personally think of them as the fear of missing out cycles, the FOMO cycles, because you go to an industry conference or you talk to some other technology peers, what people are trying to do, what skunk work labs are doing. You pick any one of these bullets. Like, have you tried blockchain yet? Like, oh, we're using blockchain to do X, Y, and Z. Every one of these causes, maybe I can speak for myself, causes some anxiety about how you do things. Honestly, every one of these bullet points has a value statement, has a reason to why you would do it, has some business value that is going to change your organization and how it works. I didn't want to spend this hour talking about why you need to think about digital validation tools or thinking about or blockchain or AI or what IoT is going to look in the future. We need a place where we can enable these things to come together. How we can utilize these technologies in such a way that I can segment out differences between my data layer, my application layer, and my human experience that sits across the top. That is more important to me about how you structure your teams and how you successfully try to bring in whatever the next evolutionary technology is going to be, because it's always going to change. It's always going to be something different. I think when we think about that evolution, it's less about what technology do I deploy today. I mean, every business is going to have to look in the mirror and look at how their business runs and how they improve to find the right outcome that they're looking for, match it to the right data source, match it to the right technology. But you need to establish an environment where you can constantly evolve. I started early in this presentation talking about my experience from 10 years ago where I couldn't virtualize a server. I can't hear you. Like, I don't know if other people groaned or laughed or had a similar experience when you're trying to push technology. Oh man, that feels such a long time ago. 10 years, not that much. Where are we going to be 10 years from now? Like, this is amazing, right? If 10 years from now, I'm going to be talking about these architectures, talking about these technologies as if they're legacy. That's how quickly things move. I need to set up, and I recommend for everyone that we work with, how do I set up an environment and the appropriate teams to build this evolutionary process into your organization? I think we're in a really unique position based off of the capabilities we have now with the cloud. It's enough of a pivot. This is like a 20-year pivot, a 15-year pivot with cloud-based technologies and where things can go. Then I think it's worth recognizing that. So how we rebuild and restructure as we go into this post-disruption standpoint is going to be important. So I like this. This is a Gartner, another Gartner interview as to how people are going. And I love these three things that you can do now. Establish a clear path, address talent shortages, and then scale. So what does that mean in practice? These are some of the, again, I wanted to share some of our thinking of how we think about this, how ZÆTHER is approaching some of this, because we know we're in a disruptive landscape. But we also know that there's way more capability. There's way more that we can do now that we couldn't have thought was possible 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So establishing a clear path, this to me is around understanding why we're here and why we do these projects. Start with the business. Start with the outcomes first. If you start with technology, you might get some quick wins. You might get some low-hanging fruit. You might solve a small pain. But you're building solutions that are point solutions. If you want to think about an integrated enterprise and how things work, understanding what the broader enterprise looks like, what your strategy is, what your philosophy is, what data decisions are being made, what you are doing with that data, very important question to ask before you ever start saying, I'm going to pick this thing, I'm going to pick this technology, I'm going to pick that one for whatever reason. Again, understanding where you are on the development life cycle. I feel like there's a lot of companies which are starting to cross the chasm, that are these disruptive companies that are changing the game, changing how we interact with these traditional digital systems. You have to recognize where you are on that and working with them. I was at a conference earlier this month, and we were able to talk to some folks that had been through a long partnership and a long relationship with one of these new applications, where they worked together to establish what functionality was required, what was needed, and how that's getting built. These relationships that you have with these newer companies, newer vendors, it's not about buying the perfect solution and it works perfectly and you're done. It's about a relationship. It's a relationship working together, and a long-term relationship to make sure that you start getting the critical functionality in the application. You're feeding that feedback back to them. The customer feedback is the most important part of these startups, these new companies, these ones that are trying to change the game. That feedback is the lifeblood to their organization. How you partner is going to be different. And then again, so this last piece to this is understanding experimentation. Experimentation is where you can get creative, where you can start seeing. When you experiment, you're not trying to prove a user requirement. You're trying to discover what the requirement is. You're trying to discover what you can possibly do in the future, and also fail. If you experiment and you fail, it's of low consequence as opposed to an investment. The talent side, I've talked enough about teams. I think you understand that the teams aspect, how teams come together, is important. Another thing that I hope we all recognize when we look in the mirror, this was hard for me to come to. We need to start with humility. Where we are today, I don't have playbooks and proven solutions, and this is exactly how it's going to go, and this is exactly how we validate, and exactly how it's going to happen, exactly how we deploy, how we gather user stories. I need to understand that we're starting with humility. There's so much out there. There's so much value, and so much things that can be done. But the talent that we have isn't who's been working in the cloud for the past 20 years in life science. Nobody's been doing that. The question you have to ask yourself: who's ready to wrestle with the technology and get it to closure? And closure could be a successful deployment. Closure could also be, you know what, we tried it, we failed, we got to move on. We got to do something different. We got to pivot. We got to be agile. On top of all of this, how we hire sort of this new basis of IT, OT talent, the similar type story, this is foundational. This is foundational to how you bring things together, how you bring applications and data and end users and analytics. There's a new skill set that needs to be built and understood internally, whether that be from building cloud architectures, from redesigning data centers and edge devices, or how you handle cybersecurity. This is a big push for us within ZÆTHER, making sure we have this understood, and they have the capability to drive this, because I can't fall back on some traditional IT sections. Lastly, around scaling your organizations. Like I said in the last slide, any type of governance, anything you set up should be based around evolution. These aren't point-in-time solutions. You're going to progress. Things that are new today are going to be old 5 years from now, are going to be ancient 10 years from now. And you have to come to these types of decisions from a point of view of not in a digital transformation event, but how do I set myself up for a digital evolution, continuously moving with what technology is out there. There's this concept, and I realize that I don't have the link to this concept around the 6 R's. There is an AWS article written by one of their thought leaders, Stephen Orban. I realized when we sent the slides over, this hadn't been cited, so I can cite that separately. He talks about how you think, what different strategies you have as you go through this evolution. You're going to have to make some decisions where you where you make modifications to existing. You may go through some places where you're saying, you know what, I'm going to pivot things to the cloud in a different way. It could be the thing where you're going to, it could be a choice where you're going to a different system. It could be the type of thing where you're saying, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to retire. I'm going to retire the system, and that's the end of the life cycle for this particular portion of my enterprise. Or I retain, which means I do nothing. I just leave it as it is, and I revisit some later time. And then this last piece, and I can't say this enough. This is where creativity meets scale. I need to be able to experiment early and be creative early and find value early. All of these new technologies, every dot on that technology adoption or that hype cycle, it's an experimentation mode. We're learning and we're getting excited. I need an environment where I can learn, but the minute I start to get to the point where I can see value, I got to be able to start to standardize, have systems in place to standardize so that I can scale. I can scale it out for whatever it is. There's a lot here. Thank you. Thank you for those of you that are on the line. Obviously, get very excited talking about this type of stuff and the types of use cases and the stories that we've had trying to build this together, and why we're excited about the future and why we're trying to reorganize into this new space and how we help our customers. This is my contact information. Reach out to me directly. Love to answer questions.